We have 2 hours before they breach our encryption and expose 47 million customer records. This will be the biggest data breach in tech history. Marcus's voice cracked through the phone at 3:47 a.m. Larry, we're out of options. Larry Irving, Silicon Valley billionaire, was already pulling on clothes, his mind racing. Then it hit him. The vulnerability. The one his housekeeper had warned him about 3 months ago. His housekeeper? 20 minutes later, Doris Powell walked into the war room wearing jeans and a Code Like a Girl t-shirt. The room fell silent. Executives in $1,000 suits stared at this black woman who looked like she'd walked in from a completely different world. "Who the hell is that?" someone muttered. "This is Doris Powell," Larry announced. "She's going to stop the attack." The board chair's voice was ice cold. "Larry, this is not the time for whatever diversity stunt you're planning." But what nobody in that room knew was that their housekeeper had been secretly saving their billion-dollar company for 6 months. And what Larry was about to discover would destroy everything he thought he knew about talent, intelligence, and the broken system he'd spent 20 years building. But before we dive into this incredible story, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button right now and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in New York, London, Singapore? I want to know where this story is reaching, because what you're about to hear isn't just entertainment, it's a wake-up call that could change how you see the people around you. So subscribe, comment your location, and let's get into this story. Larry's hand slammed against the study door, sending it crashing against the wall with a violence that made the picture frames rattle. Doris's fingers froze above the keyboard, her dark eyes widening as she turned to face him. The glow from the multiple monitors painted her face in blues and greens, illuminating an expression Larry couldn't quite read. Fear, yes, but something else beneath it. Something that looked almost like resignation. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Larry's voice cut through the silence like a blade. He strode across the Persian rug, his expensive shoes making no sound, predatory in his approach. "Step away from that computer, now." Doris rose slowly from the leather chair, her hands visible, palms out in a gesture of surrender. But she didn't step away. She positioned herself between Larry and the monitors, as if protecting something precious. "Mr. Irving, if you'll just let me explain." "Explain?" Larry's laugh was cold and sharp. He pulled his phone from his pocket. "I'm looking at my proprietary source code open on my personal system. What exactly is there to explain? You're fired. And I'm calling the police." "Please, sir, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Larry moved closer, his eyes scanning the screens behind her. His blood ran cold. There were folders open he recognized immediately, the core architecture of SecureNet, his company's flagship encryption software. Files that contained trade secrets worth hundreds of millions. Files that, in the wrong hands, could destroy everything he'd built. Corporate espionage. Theft of intellectual property. Do you have any idea what you've done? Who are you working for? Who put you up to this? Doris's jaw tightened. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Not guilt, but indignation. "I'm not working for anyone, Mr. Irving, and I'm not stealing anything." "Then what do you call this?" He gestured at the screens, his finger shaking with rage. "You're accessing confidential company files on my personal computer. Files you have absolutely no authorization to touch. Files you couldn't possibly understand even if—" He stopped himself, but the unsaid words hung in the air between them. Doris caught them anyway. Her chin lifted slightly, her voice quiet but steady. "Even if what, sir? Even if I'm just your housekeeper? Even if I'm just the woman who cleans your toilets and dusts your bookshelves?" The directness of her words caught Larry off guard. He'd expected tears, pleading, perhaps some elaborate lie about accidentally clicking the wrong thing. But Doris stood her ground with a dignity that seemed incongruous with the situation. She wasn't cowering. She wasn't making excuses. She was protecting those screens as if they contained something that belonged to her. "I'm trying to save your company, Mr. Irving," she said, and there was something in her voice now, urgency mixed with frustration. "If you'd just listen for 1 minute." "Save my company?" Larry's finger hovered over his phone. "The only thing I need saving from is employees who betray my trust." Larry's thumb was already moving toward the dial button when Doris spoke again, her voice cutting through his anger with unexpected force. "There's a vulnerability in SecureNet's authentication protocol. Line 2,147 of the core module. A race condition that creates a window, exactly 3.2 milliseconds, where an attacker can bypass encryption entirely. Your engineers missed it 6 months ago during the security audit." "I didn't." Larry's hand froze. The specificity of her statement made him pause, despite himself. "What did you just say?" Doris reached slowly toward the desk, her movements deliberate, non-threatening. She pulled open a drawer and extracted a worn leather notebook, its edges frayed from use. "I've been documenting everything, Mr. Irving. Every vulnerability I've found. Every fix I've implemented. Every disaster I've prevented while you and your team were none the wiser." She held the notebook out to him, but Larry didn't take it immediately. He was staring at her as if seeing her for the first time, trying to reconcile the woman who'd served him coffee that morning with someone who could speak fluently about race conditions and authentication protocols. "You're telling me," he said slowly, his voice dripping with skepticism, "that you, my housekeeper, have been hacking into my company's software? And I'm supposed to believe this is somehow benevolent?" "Not hacking into, Mr. Irving. Fixing." Doris opened the notebook herself, revealing pages filled with dense technical notes, diagrams, and code snippets written in meticulous handwriting. "6 months ago, I was cleaning your study when I noticed code on your screen. You'd left it open during a video call. I saw something that bothered me, a memory allocation error that could cause a cascade failure. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I knew what would happen if it went live." Larry snatched the notebook from her hands, flipping through pages that detailed a level of technical understanding that seemed impossible. Each entry was dated, time-stamped, with before and after code samples. His eyes caught on phrases that made his chest tighten. "Buffer overflow exploit, SQL injection vector, cryptographic weakness in key exchange." "This is absurd," he muttered, but his conviction was wavering. "My team consists of engineers from MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, people with decades of experience. You're saying they all miss these issues?" "I'm saying they're human, Mr. Irving, and humans miss things, especially when they're overworked, underfunded, and pressured to ship products on impossible deadlines." Doris's voice had gained strength now, the fear receding as professional passion took over. "Your last quarter push? When you demanded the SecureNet 4.0 launch be moved up by 3 months? Your team cut corners. They had to. And those corners created gaps that hackers dream about." Larry felt heat rising in his face. Partly anger, partly something uncomfortably close to shame. He remembered that push, remembered overriding his CTO's concerns about the accelerated timeline. The board had been pressing for growth, and he'd delivered. But at what cost? "Even if any of this were true," he said, his voice tight, "how would you, a housekeeper, have the knowledge to identify, let alone fix these supposed vulnerabilities?" The question hung in the air, and Larry saw something flash across Doris's face. Pain, perhaps. Or maybe just exhaustion at having to justify her existence yet again. "Because I've been coding since I was 12 years old, Mr. Irving. Because I taught myself C++, Python, and Java using library books and free online courses. Because I've spent the last 15 years studying cybersecurity in every spare moment between jobs that actually pay the bills." Her voice was steady but carried an edge now. Because intelligence doesn't require a degree from Stanford, and genius doesn't check your bank account before deciding where to appear. Larry felt the rebuke like a physical blow. He looked down at the notebook again. Really looked this time. The dates went back 6 months, exactly as she'd said. He flipped to a specific entry. March 15th. His mind raced back. That was 2 weeks before SecureNet 4.0 launched. They'd encountered a mysterious bug that had nearly derailed the release, a last-minute issue that had somehow resolved itself overnight. His team had called it a miracle. March 15th, he said aloud. We had a critical bug that day. Session tokens were persisting across logouts, creating a massive security hole. Session token poisoning? Doris confirmed quietly. I fixed it at 2:47 a.m., uploaded the patch through your company's anonymous bug bounty portal. Your team implemented it without ever knowing where it came from. Larry's head snapped up. The anonymous submission? That was you? All 17 of them were me, Mr. Irving. Doris gestured to the notebook. Every anonymous patch your team has praised over the last 6 months for its elegant solutions and deep system understanding. All me. Working on your computer after hours because I couldn't afford one of my own. The weight of her words settled over the room like a physical presence. Larry's mind was spinning, trying to process information that contradicted everything he thought he knew. He pulled out his phone again, but this time to access his company's internal systems. He pulled up the bug bounty portal, the list of anonymous submissions. 17 patches, all accepted, all implemented, all from the same anonymous user ID. The submission timestamp for the March 15th patch, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. 2:47 a.m. I couldn't sleep, Doris said. Knowing that vulnerability existed, knowing millions of people's data was at risk. So I came back here after my shift ended. I fixed it. I fixed all of them. Larry felt something crumbling inside him. His certainty, his assumptions, the comfortable narrative he'd constructed about merit and success, and who deserved to sit at which tables. He looked at Doris, really looked at her, and saw not his housekeeper but a fellow engineer. Perhaps one more talented than anyone on his payroll. He struggled for words. This is impossible. It's only impossible if you've convinced yourself that people like me don't exist, Mr. Irving. Doris's voice was gentle now, almost pitying. But we do exist. We've always existed. We're just invisible to people who've never had to look. Larry's phone buzzed in his hand, a message from his CTO. Security team still stuck on the recursive loop problem. Third all-nighter this week. Running out of options. He stared at the message, then at Doris, a wild idea forming in his mind. You're so confident in your abilities? He asked, his tone shifting from accusatory to challenging. Fine. Prove it. My team has been working on a problem for 3 weeks. A recursive loop in our data processing engine that's causing random crashes. Our best engineers can't crack it. If you're as good as you claim, show me. Doris met his gaze without flinching. Give me access to the problem specs in 30 minutes, Mr. Irving. That's all I need. Larry felt a strange cocktail of emotions. Skepticism, curiosity, and something that might have been hope. He gestured toward his computer. You're on. But Doris, if you can't solve this, I'm not just calling the police. I'm making sure you never work in this city again. Doris's fingers were already moving toward the keyboard, her expression focused and unafraid. And if I do solve it, Mr. Irving? What then? Larry had no answer. He wasn't sure he wanted to consider what it would mean if his housekeeper succeeded where his million-dollar team had failed. But he stepped aside, giving her access to the terminal, and watched as her hands flew across the keys with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The game had changed, and Larry Irving had a sinking feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. Larry pulled up his laptop and navigated to the secure development server, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency even as his mind churned with doubt. This was absurd. He was about to let his housekeeper attempt to solve a problem that had cost his company over $200,000 in engineering hours and counting. But something in Doris's unwavering confidence, or perhaps it was his own desperate need to prove her wrong, pushed him forward. 3 weeks ago, our data processing engine started experiencing random crashes, he said, pulling up the relevant files. No pattern, no warning. We've had 8 senior engineers working around the clock trying to isolate the cause. Memory leak somewhere in the core processing module. Over 50,000 lines of code. It's costing us approximately $30,000 per day in server downtime and lost productivity. Doris leaned forward, her eyes scanning the screen with an intensity that reminded Larry of his best engineers during crunch time. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward the keyboard. Larry stepped aside, checking his watch with deliberate emphasis. "You said 30 minutes. Clock starts now." For the first few minutes, Doris said nothing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through file structures with the ease of someone who'd spent years in complex codebases. She pulled up memory profilers, execution logs, and stack traces, her eyes darting between multiple terminal windows she'd opened with rapid-fire commands. Larry watched, his arms crossed, trying to maintain his skeptical posture even as something uncomfortably like admiration began to creep in. "Your engineers have been looking at the data processing functions," Doris murmured, almost to herself. "But the leak isn't there, it's upstream." Her fingers never stopped moving, typing commands Larry recognized as advanced memory analysis tools. "You recently upgraded your threading library, didn't you? Version 4.2 to 4.3? Larry's eyebrows shot up. That upgrade had happened 5 weeks ago, a routine update barely worth mentioning in team meetings. "How did you?" "It's in your dependency logs. I noticed it while reviewing your commit history." Doris pulled up a specific file, scrolling rapidly through hundreds of lines of code. "The new version changed how thread local storage is handled. Your data processors are creating thread pools, but the cleanup function isn't being called properly when threads are destroyed under high load. The memory just accumulates, like a slow poison." Larry leaned in despite himself, looking at the code she was highlighting. It was a section his team had marked as reviewed and cleared weeks ago. "That function has been stable for years. There's no reason." There wasn't a reason until the library upgrade changed the underlying behavior. Doris was already opening a new file, creating what looked like a fix. "The old version automatically handled cleanup even if you didn't explicitly call it. The new version requires explicit cleanup calls in the thread destructor. Your code assumed the old behavior. It's a subtle incompatibility, easy to miss unless you're looking specifically at the interaction between your threading model and the new library implementation." She worked in focused silence for another 15 minutes, her code taking shape with a clarity that Larry found mesmerizing. She wasn't just patching the immediate problem. She was restructuring the entire thread management system to be more robust, adding safety checks and fallback mechanisms that his team should have implemented years ago. "There," Doris said finally, pushing back from the desk. "The main fix is in the thread destructor. Explicit cleanup calls with null checks. But I've also added resource monitoring and automatic thread pool resizing to prevent similar issues in the future. You'll want your team to review it, obviously, but this should eliminate the crashes." Larry looked at his watch. 27 minutes. He stared at the screen, at the elegant solution Doris had crafted, feeling something cold settle in his stomach. It made perfect sense. The logic was sound, the implementation clean. This was exactly the kind of fix his team would have celebrated if it had come from one of their senior architects. "This needs to be tested," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Deployed to our development environment, Run through quality assurance. Of course, Doris agreed quietly. She stood, smoothing her uniform with hands that trembled slightly now that the work was done. But it will work, Mr. Irving. I'm certain of it. Larry wanted to argue, to find some flaw in her reasoning, but he couldn't. Instead, he found himself saying, "Wait here," before walking out of the study and pulling out his phone. He called his CTO, Marcus Chen, waking him from what was probably his first sleep in days. "Marcus, I need you to implement a fix remotely. I'm sending you code right now. Deploy it to dev and run the stress tests." "Larry, it's midnight. We've tried everything. Just do it. Humor me." He sent the code, then returned to the study where Doris stood by the window, looking out at the city lights below. She looked small suddenly, vulnerable in a way she hadn't during the coding session. The transformation back to housekeeper seemed almost physical, as if the confidence she'd displayed at the keyboard was something she could only borrow temporarily. "How long have you been teaching yourself?" Larry asked, surprising himself with the question. Doris turned, her expression guarded. "Since I was 12, sir. Used to go to the library after school, stay until closing. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, she'd save programming books for me. Outdated ones that nobody checked out anymore. I'd copy code examples into notebooks by hand because we couldn't afford a computer at home." Larry's phone buzzed. "Marcus. What the hell? Where did this code come from? It's brilliant." Then, 3 minutes later, "Dev tests are clean. 0 crashes under maximum load. Larry, this is it. This is the fix. Who wrote this?" Larry looked at Doris, at this woman who'd been invisible in his home for 2 years, and felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. "Run it overnight," he texted back. "Full stress testing. Report in the morning." "You should go home," he told Doris. "Get some rest." "Am I fired, Mr. Irving?" The question hung in the air between them. Larry thought about the easy answer, the safe answer. "Yes, you're fired for unauthorized access and we'll call it even." But Marcus's text was still glowing on his phone. "It's brilliant." "No," he heard himself say. "You're not fired, but we're not done talking. Be here tomorrow at 9 a.m., not as my housekeeper, as... we'll figure out what." After Doris left, Larry sat alone in his study, pulling up the anonymous bug bounty submissions she'd claimed were hers. He cross-referenced the code styles, the commenting patterns, the specific approaches to problem-solving. Then he pulled up Doris's fix from tonight, analyzing its structure with the clinical detachment of someone who'd been reviewing code for 20 years. The patterns matched. Every single submission bore the same hallmarks: elegant simplicity, defensive programming practices, and an almost obsessive attention to edge cases. The person who'd submitted those anonymous patches and the person who'd just solved his memory leak in 27 minutes were unquestionably the same. As dawn broke over Silicon Valley, Larry was still at his desk, surrounded by printouts and notes, his laptop displaying side-by-side code comparisons. Marcus's final report had come in at 5 a.m. 16 hours of stress testing, 0 failures. This is the most stable the system has been in months. Whoever wrote this is a genius. We need to hire them immediately. Larry laughed, a sound that held no humor. Hire them. His company had already employed this genius for 2 years, paying her $15 an hour to clean toilets while her code silently held together a billion-dollar enterprise. He thought about the hundreds of resumes his HR team filtered every week, looking for candidates from the right schools with the right experience. He thought about his diversity initiatives, carefully worded press releases about commitment to inclusion, while his automated systems rejected anyone who didn't fit a narrow profile. Doris Powell didn't fit that profile. No degree from Stanford. No previous employment at prestigious tech firms, no network of influential references. Just raw, undeniable talent that his systems were designed to ignore. Larry closed his laptop and stared at his reflection in the darkened screen. The man looking back had built an empire on the belief that merit always rose to the top, that cream never stayed at the bottom. But here was irrefutable proof that he'd been wrong. Genius didn't always announce itself with the right credentials. Sometimes it showed up in a housekeeper's uniform, fixing your company's problems in the middle of the night because the alternative was letting people get hurt. His phone buzzed again. Marcus. Seriously, Larry. Who is this person? We need them on the team yesterday. Larry typed a response, then deleted it. Then tried again. Finally, he settled on 9 a.m. meeting. Conference room. You're going to want to sit down for this. He had 9 hours to figure out how to explain to his executive team that their company's secret savior had been hiding in plain sight, dusting their awards and making their coffee. 9 hours to confront the uncomfortable truth that everything he thought he knew about talent, merit, and success might be built on foundations far more fragile than he'd ever imagined. The sun was fully up now, painting his study in shades of gold. Larry picked up Doris's worn notebook, running his fingers over the careful documentation of 6 months of invisible labor. Guardian angel, he'd thought earlier with contempt, but looking at the evidence now, he couldn't think of a better description. His company owed its survival to a woman he'd never bothered to truly see, and that realization, more than anything else that night, told Larry Irving exactly how broken the system really was. Larry told Doris to take the rest of the week off with pay while he sorted things out. But sorting things out wasn't what occupied his weekend. Instead, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in years: actual investigative fieldwork. He started with a simple Google search: Doris Powell coding. Nothing. She had no LinkedIn profile, no GitHub account under her real name, no digital footprint in the tech world whatsoever. But a different search yielded results: Free Coding Classes Oakland. The third result was a community center website with a faded banner announcing Weekend Programming Workshop for Youth. All welcome, no cost. Saturday morning found Larry driving into a neighborhood his GPS seemed reluctant to navigate. The community center occupied a converted church building, its parking lot cracked and sprouting weeds. Inside, he followed the sound of voices to a room where about 15 kids focused intently on ancient desktop computers. And there, moving between them with patience and energy he'd never witnessed in his mansion, was Doris. She looked different here, not just without the uniform, but in the way she carried herself. The careful invisibility she maintained in his home was gone, replaced by a presence that commanded the room through genuine connection. Remember, debugging is like being a detective, Doris was saying to a girl of about 10. The computer is telling you exactly what's wrong. You just have to learn its language. Larry slipped into the back of the room unnoticed, watching as Doris moved between students with an uncanny ability to meet each at their exact level. She explained complex concepts in accessible ways, celebrated small victories with genuine enthusiasm, turned mistakes into teaching moments rather than failures. "Miss Doris, I finished the challenge." A boy of about 12 raised his hand excitedly. Doris examined his code, her pride evident. "Jamal, this is excellent. You even added error handling I didn't ask for. This code is good enough for your portfolio. When you apply for that summer program at Berkeley, this is the kind of work that's going to make them notice you." "You really think I could get in?" "Jamal, you're one of the brightest students I've ever taught. The only difference between you and kids at fancy prep schools is opportunity. You're giving yourself the work ethic. The rest is just believing you belong there." Larry felt something twist in his chest. This was what teaching looked like when it wasn't about prestige or profit. During the break, Doris froze when she saw him. "Mr. Irving, what are you doing here?" "Learning. May I stay?" What followed was 2 hours of the most effective teaching Larry had ever witnessed. Doris broke down concepts into digestible pieces, used relatable metaphors, and created an environment where questions were celebrated. After class, a teenage girl approached Doris shyly. "Miss Doris, I got accepted to the Girls Who Code summer program, full scholarship." Doris pulled her into a hug, tears bright in her eyes. "Keisha, I knew you would." After the students left, Larry helped shut down computers. "How long have you been doing this?" 4 years. Started with 3 kids in my apartment." "How many students have gone through your program?" "Maybe 60 or 70. 12 have gotten college scholarships. 5 are studying computer science. 3 are working in tech now." Larry did the math. Doris was creating outcomes most expensive prep schools would envy, using decade-old equipment and her own unpaid time. "These kids are me 10 years ago," Doris said. "Smart, hungry, capable, but invisible to a system that doesn't know how to see them. If I can show them that people like us belong in tech, then every minute is worth it." Larry watched her pack up teaching materials and understood clearly what he'd become, someone who'd forgotten why he'd started coding in the first place. Watching Doris teach, seeing the fire in her eyes, Larry recognized his younger self, before success had calcified into arrogance. "I used to be like you," he said quietly. "I used to believe technology could change the world." Doris looked at him with understanding. "It's not too late to remember, Mr. Irving." Monday morning, Larry sat in his office staring at Doris's resume. It was impressive by any objective measure. 7 programming languages, contributions to major open-source projects, competitive coding rankings in top percentiles. But it lacked the magic words. No Stanford, no MIT, no Carnegie Mellon. An uncomfortable but necessary idea formed. Larry retyped Doris's resume word for word, changing only the name to Dorothy Palmer and the address to Palo Alto. Everything else remained identical: the self-taught background, the lack of formal degree, the impressive credentials. He submitted it through his company's standard application portal. The rejection email arrived in 23 hours. "After careful review of your application, we have decided to pursue other candidates whose qualifications more closely match our current needs." Larry traced Dorothy Palmer's submission through the system's back end. The resume had never reached a human being. The automated screening software flagged it immediately. "Education requirement not met. Recommend auto-reject." Processing time, 3.7 seconds. 3.7 seconds to destroy someone's dream. Larry began pulling hiring data. Over the past year, Irving Technologies had received 8,247 applications for technical positions. Of those, 6,891 had been automatically rejected, 83.6% eliminated by algorithms before human review. Primary disqualifying factors: lack of degree from target schools, employment gaps, addresses in low-income zip codes, non-traditional career paths. He pulled random examples of auto-rejected candidates: a woman who'd taught herself programming while raising 3 kids, rejected for insufficient continuous employment history. A man with a successful freelance business, rejected for non-standard work background. A candidate with a state university degree, rejected because the algorithm rated their institution as Tier 3. Larry called an emergency meeting with his head of HR, Patricia Morrison. "Walk me through our technical hiring process," he said. She launched into explanation. "We use best-in-class applicant tracking that pre-screens candidates based on key qualifications. It reduces time to hire and ensures we only review candidates meeting our standards." "What standards?" "Bachelor's degree minimum, preferably from target schools. Relevant work experience at recognized companies." Larry showed her the Dorothy Palmer rejection. "This candidate was auto-rejected yesterday. Tell me why." Patricia scanned it. "No 4-year degree, self-taught background. We can't verify quality of non-traditional education." This candidate codes in 7 languages, has major open-source contributions, and ranks top 1% on HackerRank. But she's a risk because she didn't attend Stanford? We have to draw lines somewhere, Larry. Do you know who Dorothy Palmer is? Larry's voice rose. She doesn't exist. I submitted our housekeeper's resume under a fake name. Your system rejected one of the most talented engineers I've ever encountered in under 24 hours. Patricia's face went pale. Your housekeeper? Doris Powell. She's been anonymously fixing our security flaws for months, and your system would never let her through the door. Larry pulled up his analysis. I analyzed performance reviews of every engineer we've hired in 5 years, correlated with their schools. No correlation. Engineers from state schools perform just as well as Ivy League graduates. The things we select for have almost no predictive value for job performance. Then what do they predict? Privilege, Patricia. We've built a meritocracy that measures who had the most advantages to begin with. After she left, Larry sat thinking about Doris's students, Jamal dreaming of Berkeley, Keisha with her scholarship. How many would apply to Irving Technologies someday? How many would be rejected in 3.7 seconds? He pulled up his company's mission statement. To democratize technology and make innovation accessible to everyone. They'd built walls and called them standards, codified exclusion and called it excellence. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Board meeting tomorrow. Need your decision on Chief Security Officer. 3 final candidates from top firms. Larry looked at Doris's resume on his screen. He typed back, "Cancel the search. I've found our candidate. You're not going to believe where she came from." The call came at 3:47 a.m. Marcus's voice was tight with panic. "We're under attack. Sophisticated, coordinated, and they're inside SecureNet itself." Larry was pulling on clothes before Marcus finished. "How bad?" "Worst case. They've bypassed our firewall, compromised authentication servers, attempting to access our user database. 47 million customer records. If they breach encryption, we're looking at the biggest data breach in tech history." "The vulnerability," Larry said, realization hitting. "The one Doris warned about." "What vulnerability? Who's Doris?" "Get everyone to the war room. I'm bringing someone." Larry called Doris, praying she'd answer at 4 a.m. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Mr. Irving?" "Doris, I need you at my office immediately. We're under attack. The exact vulnerability you documented." Her voice sharpened instantly. "The authentication protocol breach?" "Yes. I'll be there in 20 minutes." The war room was chaos when Larry arrived, packed with executives, massive monitors displaying cascading code and red alerts. "Time to full penetration, 2 hours, 14 minutes. Marcus rushed over. "Where's your miracle solution?" "She's on her way." Doris arrived wearing jeans and her Code Like a Girl t-shirt. Every conversation stopped. Executives in designer suits stared at this woman from a different world. "Who the hell is that?" someone muttered. "This is Doris Powell," Larry announced. "She's going to stop the attack." The silence was deafening. Then board chair Victoria Chen spoke, ice cold. "Larry, this is not the time for whatever diversity stunt you're planning." "She has more expertise than anyone here. She's been anonymously fixing our security flaws for 6 months." The room erupted. Larry pulled up the anonymous bug bounty submissions. "Every patch you've praised, that was her. And 3 months ago, she documented this exact vulnerability." "This is insane," a senior engineer said. "You want to hand our systems to someone we've never heard of?" A junior engineer called from the back. "I've studied those anonymous submissions for months. The code is brilliant." He looked at Doris with recognition. "That was you." The timer ticked. 2 hours occur 3 minutes. Victoria stepped forward. "Give me one reason we should trust this." Larry looked at Doris. "Because she already knows how to stop this. She knew 3 months ago. "You're gambling our company's survival," Marcus said. "You're already gambling," Doris said quietly, her voice cutting through the noise. "Your conventional approaches won't work against an unconventional attack. I've been watching your defensive patterns. You're following textbook protocols against attackers who've studied your textbook." She walked to the monitors. "This isn't random, it's surgical. They know your architecture because they've been probing for months. That authentication vulnerability? It's a door they built by exploiting how your team patches security. See how they're cycling through entry points? They're using your defensive responses to map your system in real time." Marcus moved closer. "She's right. They're triggering our responses deliberately." "So what do we do?" Victoria demanded. "Stop playing defense. Make them wrong about what they think they know. Give me system access and 30 minutes. I'll implement a honeypot architecture that redirects their attack while we rebuild the actual authentication layer. They'll think they're succeeding while we cut them off." Victoria looked at the disaster on screens, then at Doris. "If this fails, Irving Technologies likely won't survive. 47 million people depend on us. Can you handle that pressure?" Doris met her gaze, unflinching. "Ma'am, I've been carrying that pressure for 6 months without pay or recognition. The only difference now is, you'll be watching." Marcus hesitated, then entered his credentials. "You're in. God help us all." Doris sat at the keyboard, fingers flying, and the room watched in silence as code appeared. Complex, elegant, completely unlike anything they'd seen. Larry held his breath. He'd gambled everything on genius finally being recognized. The clock kept counting down. For 20 minutes, Doris worked in complete silence, constructing the honeypot architecture. "I need someone who knows our server infrastructure," she said without looking up. James Kim stepped forward. "That's me. Help me spin up shadow instances, without triggering alerts the attackers might detect." "How much capacity?" "Everything. We're making them think they're stealing the entire database while we feed them encrypted gibberish." Marcus watched the technical ballet. "This is brilliant. Why didn't we think of this?" "Because you were following the playbook they've already read. I need another engineer. Someone who understands our authentication protocol." David Chen, previously skeptical, stepped forward. "I wrote most of that system." "Then help me rewrite it in 40 minutes. The vulnerability is in token validation, a race condition between authentication check and session creation. We're collapsing that window while their attention is on the honeypot." David pulled up code, understanding flooding his face. "The threading. When multiple requests hit simultaneously." "Exactly. Creates a 3.2 millisecond window where they can inject a malformed token with elevated privileges. They've been using it for months." Timer. 1 hour 31 minutes. Doris orchestrated the defense like a conductor, pulling in engineers one by one, assigning tasks, explaining attack vectors with crystalline clarity. The room's resistance evaporated as they watched mastery unfold. "Honeypot is live," James announced. "They're redirecting." The attack visualization shifted. Red tendrils moved toward the decoy. It was working. "Now they'll get greedy," Doris murmured. "Pull data faster. Won't notice we're fixing the real vulnerability." "David, how's the authentication rewrite?" "Almost done, but if I deploy while they're active, won't they notice?" "Not during their data extraction cycles. When they're pulling from the honeypot, their monitoring drops. We have 90-second windows." David went pale. "That's incredibly tight." "Then we better be perfect. Next extraction cycle in 8 minutes. We deploy the new authentication system, restart services, verify integrity, all in 90 seconds. Victoria had been watching silently. "What's your confidence level?" Doris met her gaze. 85% this works perfectly. 12% minor complications but success. 3% everything fails. Those aren't comfortable odds." "No, ma'am. but they're better than the 0% you had 15 minutes ago. The preparation was meticulous. Each engineer rehearsed their task 3 times. Doris caught errors before they happened, anticipated problems before they emerged. Extraction cycle starting, James called. 90% bandwidth capacity. Now, deploy everything. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Commands deployed across systems, services restarted, security layers rebuilt in real time. 45 seconds, status check. Server instances updated. Authentication system live. 70 seconds, final integrity checks. Silence except for clicking keys. 85 seconds, they're finishing their pull. If they'll notice, it's now. Every person held their breath. The attackers paused, then continued extraction. They bought it, James whispered. Phase 1 complete, Doris said with the smallest smile. 12 hours later, at hour 14, Doris leaned back. It's over. Attack neutralized, their systems mapped, our data never compromised, 0 loss. The war room erupted in applause. Engineers who dismissed her now crowded around with questions. David was already studying her code with student-like intensity. Victoria stepped forward. Ms. Powell, I owe you an apology. That was the most impressive technical display I've witnessed in 40 years. An hour later, the full board convened. Larry stood with Doris beside him. For 2 years, the woman who saved this company worked here as my housekeeper, Larry began. Self-taught, rejected from hundreds of positions including ours. She's been anonymously fixing our security flaws while cleaning our offices. The attack we survived? She warned us 3 months ago. We ignored her. The room was silent. Her name is Doris Powell. She's more talented than anyone on our technical staff. Our hiring systems were designed to exclude people exactly like her. Robert Sterling spoke. What are you proposing? That we make Doris Powell our Chief Technology Officer, effective immediately. Overlapping voices erupted. Victoria raised her hand for silence. Ms. Powell, if we offered this position, what would be your first priority? Fixing our security architecture from the ground up. What happened today was inevitable. We need complete rethinking of our approach. And second priority? Changing how we hire. We're losing extraordinary talent because we've confused credentials with capability. Victoria exchanged glances with board members. This challenges every protocol. But the last 14 hours proved irregular is sometimes exactly what's needed. I support Larry's recommendation. The vote was decisive. As board members filed out, David Chen waited with engineers. When can we start learning from you officially? Doris looked at engineers who doubted her hours earlier, now looking with respect and hunger to learn. This was real. Larry turned to her. Are you ready? Doris smiled, tired but genuine. I've been ready my entire life, Mr. Irving. I just needed someone to finally open the door. 6 months transformed Irving Technologies in ways quarterly reports could barely capture. Security incidents down 87%, customer trust at all-time highs, 3 revolutionary products launched under Doris's leadership. But numbers couldn't measure the deeper change rippling through the organization. Doris's office was on the executive floor now, personalized in ways that made executives uncomfortable and engineers welcome. One wall displayed code from her community center students. Another held her framed 1998 C++ book. She'd become not just CTO, but mentor to half the technical staff, running voluntary office hours where anyone could bring problems. The security architecture overhaul is complete, she'd announced at last month's board meeting. But more significantly, we've changed how we think about security. Every engineer now thinks like a security engineer. Products launching under her reflected that philosophy. SecureNet 5.0 wasn't just more secure. It was fundamentally reimagined. Tech journals called it the most significant advancement in encryption architecture in a decade. What they didn't know was that 3 core innovations came from Jamal, the 12-year-old from her Saturday class. The deeper transformation was in how Irving Technologies found people. Larry had thrown himself into the Hidden Genius initiative with converts' fervor. He'd personally reviewed those 6,891 auto-rejected applications, identifying 127 candidates deserving second looks. 43 were now employed, bringing perspectives that challenged comfortable assumptions. Hiring algorithms had been dismantled. Every application received human review. Target school lists eliminated. Degree requirements removed from 60% of technical positions. Results were startling. Higher quality improved, while demographic diversity exploded. Larry had partnered with 15 community colleges, 20 alternative programs, dozens of community centers. Irving Technologies now offered paid apprenticeships and a new interview process assessing problem-solving over pedigree. The first Hidden Genius Initiative cohort had just completed orientation, and Larry attended every session. "You're doing what I always thought tech was supposed to do," Marcus told him, "democratizing opportunity. I'm ashamed it took a crisis." "We're all ashamed. The question is whether shame turns into action or just comfortable guilt." The most unexpected part was Thursday evenings at East Oakland Community Hub. Larry had started observing, but observation turned into participation. Now he taught his own class, Introduction to Entrepreneurship for Teen Coders. Tonight, Larry helped Maya debug a homework tracking app she'd built. "Mr. Larry, do you think people would pay for this?" "People pay for anything solving real problems. What makes yours better than existing apps?" "Mine is designed by a student for students. Adults make these apps complicated. We just need something simple that works." Larry smiled, recognizing the insight that had made him successful. That's product-market fit. Never lose that perspective. Across the room, Doris worked with Keisha, just finished with her first Girls Who Code semester. "Miss Doris, I got an offer from Irving Technologies for their summer internship. On the security team, with you." Doris hugged her, tears bright. "I told you this would happen." After class, as they stacked chairs, Larry said, 17 new Hidden Genius Initiative applications this week. A woman teaching herself cybersecurity while working as a nursing assistant. A guy who learned coding in prison. Exactly who our old system would reject instantly. And now? Now they're getting real interviews. The door opened. A young black girl, maybe 16, stepped in wearing an Irving Technologies visitor badge. "Ms. Powell, I'm Destiny Williams. I just started as an intern today, in security." Emotion cracked her voice. "You showed me I belong there." Doris pulled her into a hug, both women crying. "Where are you from, Destiny?" 3 blocks from here. I've been teaching myself coding for 2 years. Thought I'd never get a real chance. Then I heard your story." Larry watched this exchange and felt purpose he hadn't felt in years. All the money, success, accolades. None meant as much as this moment. This was legacy. Not billions or company names, but doors opening, minds freed, genius recognized. Every Destiny who got a chance. These were measures of success that actually mattered. After Destiny left, Larry spoke his forming thought. "I spent 20 years building an empire. Thought that was the point. But it was just accumulation that didn't mean anything. And now? Now I'm teaching kids to debug code, reforming hiring practices. This feels like winning at something that matters." Doris smiled genuinely. "Welcome to the revolution, Mr. Irving. Messier than board meetings, but worth every minute." "Larry. I think you can call me Larry." 6 months ago, his housekeeper had saved his company by exposing his broken assumptions. Now his CTO was teaching him to build something better, not just a profitable business, but a system living up to ideals he'd claimed to represent. As he drove home, Larry thought about Destiny Williams and all the brilliant minds still invisible to exclusionary systems. Finding them, believing in them, giving them platforms. That was work that mattered. That was work he'd spent his life doing. And it felt finally like enough. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Turn on your post notifications so you don't miss the next one.